You know what? I think there are few things as painful as a broken heart. And what's interesting is a lot of times when we think about a broken heart, we often imagine that it's just related to a romantic relationship ending. But the truth is, if you think for a second yourself about some of the biggest, most painful, sensitive heartbreaks that you have experienced in your life, I bet if you're really honest with yourself, you'll be able to think of some people that were not romantic partners at all. Maybe it was a family member. Sometimes it can be a parent who can break your heart in different ways. Sometimes it's a different family member, maybe a sibling. I would argue that sometimes even a parent can feel that maybe a child in some ways can break their heart at some point. What about a friend? Have you ever had a friend break your heart? Or maybe it was something related to work. Maybe it was a good friend that you had at work. I think that it's even possible to feel like in losing your job sometimes. That can break your heart. Sometimes the way that it happened, maybe if you feel like it wasn't done fairly and it was a job that you really cared about and poured your heart into. But the reality is, if we are really honest with ourselves, we know that we can experience a broken heart because of a lot of different types of relationships. The question is, what can you do to heal a broken heart when it's not a romantic breakup? And I think that a lot of the same coping resources can be helpful as when it is actually a romantic breakup. One of the first things that you need to do when you are dealing with a broken heart in your life is to be patient with yourself, to allow the feelings. A lot of us don't love to feel sadness. I think sometimes people are more quick to anger because anger can feel like an empowering, strong emotion. Some people just really don't like to feel sad because they feel like they feel low energy and maybe they associate that with being vulnerable or maybe they even feel weak in some ways. Although that's not true, that's how it can feel. Well, actually allowing the feelings, as uncomfortable as they are, I do believe that a lot of times we have to sit through some of those negative feelings and allow ourselves to feel them in order to get to the point where we can say, okay, now that I have allowed the feelings, next it's time for me to figure out what to do about them. Another thing that's really helpful when dealing with a broken heart is to write in a journal. Now, maybe you're somebody that doesn't write in a leather bound journal. A lot of times that's how we think about when somebody tells you just write in a journal. Like, it needs to have your initials on it and maybe a little padlock and key or something like that. But no, it actually can just be scratch paper, printer paper. Just jot down how you're feeling. Start with something simple like, I feel overwhelmed, or I don't even know how I feel right now. Trust me, if you start with such a simple, open ended sentence, it can just flow from there when you feel sad or overwhelmed. Just write, just get it out in that way. Research shows that writing can be incredibly helpful when dealing with negative feelings. All right. Of course, you know the next one, which is lean on social support. The research is overwhelming that people dealing with emotional struggles and actually even medical illness do better when they have stronger social support, when they connect, when they are not socially isolated. So let a few people in your life know that you're dealing with a broken heart. And you may actually need to explain to them, no, 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 this isn't a romantic relationship. Someone else broke my heart in a different way. And you know what? I bet that person that you're talking to will be able to relate. I bet it's possible someone in a similar type of relationship broke their heart in the past too. But connecting in this way can make you feel like you're less alone, like somebody knows how you're doing. I think deep down, a big part of each one of us feeling just okay and in balance in our lives is knowing that there's at least one other person who knows, who happens to know how we're actually doing today. Think about it. So often you'll run into people, maybe even friends, and they'll say, "How are you?" And you'll just flippantly say, "Oh, I'm good." When a lot of times you know that you're not good, right? So having a conversation with somebody and actually letting them know that you're kind of dealing with some emotional suffering right now, it's really important because otherwise we just so automatically feel this pressure to tell everybody else around us that no, we're fine when we're not. And it's an important part of healing to be honest, to call a spade a spade when you feel down, when you feel a little broken, it's important. Another helpful resource is to look at your expectations for relationships. Think about the type of relationship where the person broke your heart, whether it was a work relationship, a family relationship, and ask yourself whether you had been telling yourself all along that that type of relationship shouldn't ever hurt you. Or had you been realistic to say that anytime two human beings have a relationship together, whether work, personal, family, or otherwise, anytime there are relationships, there is always a little risk of feelings getting hurt, of emotions getting in the way, of relationships getting bad. It's always a possibility with relationships. So look at your expectations and ask yourself whether maybe some of your expectations were too unrealistic, that maybe going forward, it is healthy for you to allow the possibility that even though a relationship that you have today feels okay and feels trusting and good, that we can't predict the future, that it is possible that we could be hurt in any future relationship we have. We hope that we don't, and it's possible that we won't be hurt in any significant way, that we won't have our heart broken in that relationship in any significant way. But there is often a little possibility that we could be hurt, even that our heart can be broken. That is a part of life. That is a part of the complexity, I believe, of human relationships. Remember, not only do you change and evolve, but other people do too. And we don't always change in exactly the same ways and at exactly the same times. So I hope some of this perspective has been helpful in thinking about how you can cope with a broken heart when it's not a romantic breakup. Don't let your broken heart now tell you that you can't feel good again and trusting and love again in the future. Don't let your broken heart tell you something that's not true. Don't let that voice tell you that you can't trust in relationships anymore because of this one relationship that broke your heart. There is always the chance for new relationships, and there's often the chance for healing or repaired relationships. And you can determine whether this relationship that broke your heart is one that you simply need to mourn and completely move on from for your own sake, for your own mental health, or whether you feel there is some validity or some possibility for repair. If you need feedback about that and have questions about it, ask some of your friends or some of your family members that you trust. Talk to a mental health therapist, which can be helpful for you. All right. I hope this has been helpful to you all.